I would like to welcome our next panelist. Shamess has what I've always considered one of the toughest jobs on set, in that he's the boss of the set, and that is assistant director. Shamess has worked in the film industry, both in Victoria and Vancouver, for over 20 years. He has credits including War on the Planet of the Apes, Power Rangers, Night at the Museum 3, Sonic and Skyscraper, just to name a few. He establishes a positive, respectful tone on day one of production and earns the reciprocal respect of each and every crew member by the end of filming. Shamess loves what he does and says, even at the end of the hardest and grouchiest day I've ever had, I've never thought of doing anything else. I love being first AD. So welcome, Shamess. This is a big job, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Great, and great questions so far. I listened to most of those from Colin's last, and they're great questions. I look forward to hearing questions from me too, you guys. So I'm going to talk first a little bit about the process for me in how I got started. As Darlene was saying, yes, I'm a first AD, working not right at the moment. I have a show coming up for Warner Brothers / Netflix here in Victoria. It will go from August, well, to camera in September and go right through till March, it looks like, which is great. This will be the first time that I have been able to work at home in quite a long time. My last kind of 4 or 5 years has all been in Vancouver, which has been totally great and fun, but it's nice not to have to take a ferry. I started in Victoria. I went to film school in Victoria in 96, 97. And as Kathleen hinted with the intros, indeed, my very first job was as a location PA with her when she was a location manager here in Victoria. Totally, absolutely loved it. Through doing days on indies and music videos, I was able to apply to the Directors Guild of Canada, the DGC, as a second AD, because I actually had enough days as a second when I got in. It has changed. The DGC membership has changed over the years as far as what one needs for prereqs, and I won't really get into that because I'm not totally sure what it is these days. I know Colin talked a little bit about the logbook holders and stuff, and I think you guys are having Andrea from the DGC on at some point to answer those guild questions, so I won't get into that too much today. But at the time that I got into the guild, we were lucky here in Victoria where we ended up with kind of a period of time where there was a series of MOWs, one after another, and there was a bunch of us that just because of good timing ended up working on these shows. You know, we were kind of doing like 6 or 7 shows a year, and I was hired as first of all as a second, but then as a first. So I did some time as a TAD, which is the trainee assistant director, which is basically the 4th AD on my team. Came up with some great first ADs and learned some great habits. But then because there weren't many ADs in Victoria, I was able to start firsting actually quite early. And it was one of those things where as soon as you're hired to do the job and you don't mess it up too badly, people think that you can do the job, and so then you're hired to do that job again. So again, I was really lucky to get my start in Victoria. Was here for a bunch of years and made the jump to Vancouver, still doing those kind of small to medium-sized movies of the week, you know, kind of 14 to 18 day schedules. A number of years in Vancouver, always commuting back and forth. And then at one point, made the decision to get into, I did series in Vancouver, and then made the jump to doing features in Vancouver. And I did my first one, as Darlene said, Night in the Museum. I did Power Rangers. We did The Predator. We did Skyscraper with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And my last feature over there was the second unit for Sonic, which just came out before this COVID business happened. And after Sonic, there was a period of time where it looked like features were kind of taking a break in Vancouver, and a really great producer, Clara George, asked me if I'd be into coming and doing series again with her and her team in Vancouver. And so I did the last season of The Magicians. And then right after that, I was doing Resident Alien, which was another NBC series in Vancouver in March when all this thing shut down. So we were about probably 3/4 or more through the series of RA once COVID hit. And so we came home, we finished the morning of the 14th of March, I think, and have been home since then. NBC kept us on for 3 more weeks with pay. So the start of this, we were still on the clock for 3 weeks. Within that time, I interviewed for this Made show, which is, as I said, the Warner Brothers Netflix thing here in Victoria. And so although our office is not open yet, it looks like it's going to happen. And I actually started on the clock this week doing a breakdown and a board. That's kind of the arc for me. The difference between all that stuff as far as features or indies or series, as far as my job goes, is not altogether different. As in the AD department, we're there to facilitate the process. So as the first AD, as Darlene kind of hinted at, I do run the logistics of the set. I'm not telling actors how to act. That's what the director's doing. But I am organizing their movement from the time that they leave the hotel in the morning. My third AD manages the circus, where all the trucks are, where hair and makeup is, where costumes is. And as soon as the actor gets there in the morning, then the third AD is dealing with the logistics of getting their breakfast and make sure they get into hair and makeup on time. Basically, it's all about making sure the timing of the actor being ready to when we're ready on set ends up meeting at that perfect spot. So as Colin was hinting at too before, so not only does the third AD manage the actors of the circus, they are also responsible for that daily production report before it goes to the office. So that's the third AD. The second AD, I'm not sure how many of you guys have probably heard about call sheets, but a call sheet is a piece of paper, although usually it's just electronic these days, that's sent out the night before about the next day's work. So it's a complete breakdown of what happens the next day as far as timing of everything, crew of everything, what scenes you're doing, what locations you're doing, where catering is. So the second AD is responsible in large part for that. So I kind of think of the third AD is managing the circus, the actors, also what's with the DPR being responsible for stuff that's happened in the past, as in that's yesterday's paperwork, whereas the second AD is responsible for what happens in the future, being the call sheet, being the next day's work. The immediate moment is run by myself and my TAD, my trainee AD on set. But also these days, I usually have an additional third on set too. So it's usually a 5-person department for me or more, depending on the size of the show. So we'll have an on-set third, we'll have a TAD, and then we'll have me. First AD is also responsible for safety on set. That's going to be a slightly expanded role these days. With COVID, our process, I think, when we go back, is going to be quite different, at least to start, depending on how long this COVID business is going to be with us. But, with PPE, and I think at least to start, it's going to be a little bit more, definitely more time consuming. We're all prepared for that. Yes. So during the process of the day is, if we have an 8 o'clock call, the first thing I do is have a safety meeting. We bring everybody in. We talk about the logistics of the day, and also if there's any safety stuff that we need to worry about, if there's any stunts or special effects, or if we're dealing with fire or anything like that, we talk about that. I also do a safety meeting before we do any stunt gags. Those big features in Vancouver that I talked about, that our second unit, often the second unit deals with the big stunts and special effects sequences because they are so time consuming. So that's not necessarily a main unit thing. On those shows, main unit would have been probably 100 plus, 120 people for lunch on a regular basis. Some days on second unit, we were 200 plus people. But, on second unit, our work would only be whatever, 3/8 of a page. It would only be 4 shots that we were doing, but because they were so complicated and convoluted, it would often take all day to get them. And the little bit different attitude with features in that with television, you have to get through your page counts. You'll have probably, depending on the size of the show, but you'll be having to do between 5 and 7 pages a day. You have to get that because it costs so much money to have a film set shooting. But when you're doing second units on features, the focus is more about getting the stuff done perfectly. So we had instances, doesn't happen very often, but if the light's not right or the stunt didn't work or something, we will go back and do it again the next day. Whereas when you're in television, that's not necessarily the case. It's just a focus on, you need to go faster for sure. I appreciate the arcs of both those different types of filmmaking for sure. It's true, Colin did hint a little bit. When I started, there was the traditional energy, I guess, of the first AD, the American system and the English system, was to have the set run in maybe a little bit more combative tone than I came in with. And I think that this is an energy that's changed and is changing nowadays on film sets. I think that producers and directors don't want that energy anymore. But there was a period where if the first AD wasn't yelling and screaming at people, the perception was that the set wasn't being run properly. I had a very different approach to that. My approach was, I felt that if you can make people feel like they're more part of the process, they were more likely to work harder if you had to ask them. If you're running out of light, if it's starting to rain, if you're behind, if you're haranguing on the crew all day long from when you're on at 7 in the morning, if the sun's going down at 5 and you're having to ask people, hey, we really need to pick it up. If you've been haranguing on them all day, then people are like, well, what's the difference between this and where we were 8 hours ago? And so then because of that, crews enjoyed working with me, knock on wood, still do, hopefully. Producers appreciated that energy, and honestly, it made for a more pleasant experience for the actors, for the cast, for the crew, for everybody. And it was something that I learned very early on from working with my parents, actually, where you got better work done and you had more fun doing it, and that's done me well over the years, I would say. And like I said, I think that attitude is changing, or has changed somewhat, at least, for sure. That's kind of the overview of the different AD positions and kind of where I came from. How's that, Darlene, for you?
Great. We've got a couple of questions here, and I've got a couple of questions myself. Now, I did have to step away for just a moment, so hopefully you didn't cover this, but is there specific training for a position, for the position of first AD, or is it all coming up through the ranks?
There's not any specific training, although, well, the one thing that one would need to do is there's a program, a computer program. Back in the day, they used to physically have these things called strip boards. We still call them strip boards. They were a physical piece of cardboard with pieces of paper cut into strips that had all the on the strips. And they would unfold, and it's basically how your whole show is going together, with each scene having one of these little strips. The program that we use on the computer is basically the same, except it's on the computer these days. So during prep, when I'm hired in prep, one of my big things, not only but to manage our time in prep and to make sure we do all the meetings that we need to do, I come up with a one-line schedule that is essentially the same thing as that old school strip board. It's a computer generated thing with every scene of the show, with all the information that we need for each scene, set deck and props, and who's in it, its interior or exterior, how long the scene is, whether it's day or night, divided into shooting days by location, by cast. So I come up with that template, as long as it works for everybody else. And then once we start shooting, I'm responsible for pushing us through that. So to answer your question in a kind of a roundabout way, knowledge and use of that program is muy importante, for sure.
Sorry, Shamess, what is the name of that program?
It's now called Movie Magic Scheduling.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's gone through a couple changes. There are a few other different options out there, but still the industry standard is called Movie Magic Scheduling. There's a Movie Magic Budgeting also that production managers use. But yeah, Movie Magic is the name of the company. When I bought mine years and years and years and years and years ago, it was $1,500. I don't think it's that much now. But to be a first AD, and also super handy to be a second, is to be able to use that program. Not always can I get off set during the day if changes come out to the script or the schedule, and so super handy if my second has the program and can make those changes herself or himself, rather than me having to do it after being on the floor all day. That's super handy.
Okay, understood. Dennis is asking, as a background performer, I sometimes get called late at night by my agent. Does she get the call at the same time as the actors do?
She would get the call when the call sheet comes out. So he or she would get an email. Basically, the call sheet doesn't go out until wrap is called. So the second AD will have that call sheet ready, but especially in instances where you say you don't wrap on time, it then affects what is going to be on the call sheet. So the call sheet can't go out actually until as soon as wrap is called. Right. Sometimes, and as Colin was saying before, if you have a 4 p.m. call or even a 10 a.m. call, we should be wrapping at about 10:30 p.m. So it's definitely possible that you won't get a call until whatever, 11 p.m. or so, if you're a background performer.
And one of the reasons for the call sheets coming out late is because you can never really tell what's going to happen on set on any given day. So you really can't decide completely, nail down your next day until after you've wrapped the existing day. Is that right?
Honestly, you should have, so the one-line schedule that I come up with during prep, that really, really should be the plan for the whole show. And that should be, so the day on that one-line schedule is what ends up on the call sheet. Okay. So if you have a one-line schedule for the show, the call sheet should be very close for that, whatever day that shows. Now that said, yes, things change a lot. That's one of the crazy things with the industry, is that you can have an actor get sick for the next day and you have to completely change everything. Or you wrap late and then because of turnaround, as in crew and actors need a specific number of hours off. You can't start until whatever time the next morning. So definitely, uh, you know, things change a lot, but in a perfect world, you know,
Yeah.
minimal changes.
Okay. And Andrew is asking, Seamus, with the intricacies of filming on location, can you describe the process of how you and the crew deal with delays when there is a tricky day on set and you need to pivot or push scenes back?
Um, Well, one of the great things that I love about our job, it's this constant process of problem solving. Uh, and then it's this thing of like, you solve all the problems, and then by take 3, when the director says, that's great, that's it, you move on from all those problems and you start another whole set of problems. So every setup, every time you move the camera, is another whole set of problems. That said, the whole point of prep, and especially a well-managed prep, there are always going to be delays on the day, as they say, for sure. But the whole point of prep and having all those meetings about all those intricacies are so when you get there, the delays are limited. By definition, the process is a little bit of waiting for stuff. But if you have a good team and good people, you know, in it, like for me, if I look back on the day and it feels like the whole day was spent shooting stuff, then that's great. Then that you've done your job.
Yeah.
If you have things over the course of the day where camera is waiting for stuff, that's kind of my fault, and that's not a good feeling at all. I appreciate being responsible for, as I said, facilitating that process moving forward. And it's a great feeling when you're ahead of everything by a couple steps.
Great. Wonderful. Let me see. Dila is asking, I used to work as a second AD on commercials for years in another country. I just moved to Toronto with my permanent residency. Where should I start? What do you suggest to me? I've got to complete the working days to be able to get into the union. I have also heard commercials don't hire as many AD positions. Should I try and get into a series or features? So someone second AD on commercials in another country, how do they get going in Canada with their permanent residency status? Where do they start?
So it'll be, I believe, and I can't totally speak for Toronto, but especially because that person has experience in commercials, I would really check that out. Lots of commercials are non-union. And so not only that, but also that's where their experience is. So I would definitely try that. I don't know, I mean, like for instance, I'm a 5-person team on this Warner Brothers thing, but commercials still at least hire 3 ADs, I'm sure. I haven't done commercials in a long time, but they would have depending on the size of the commercial, they would have a full quiver of assistant directors for sure. And again, she would maybe have a good chance of being able to get in Toronto because it would be non-union. Doing features and series is Toronto, you're going to need to get into the guild. And I can't speak to especially Ontario's process for getting in. Those days on commercials may count in that other country. That's kind of a cool part of, for me anyways, is the process around the planet is actually really similar. And it's always like, even historically, when they first started making movies, yes, for sure, things have changed technically over the years, but it's still the same basic process, which I kind of appreciate a lot. Yeah, I would say.
So it sounds like, Dila, that a good first step for her, I'm sorry, her or him, I'm sorry, I don't know, Dila, would be to start with the DGC in Ontario.
Yeah, but even before that, I would check out the commercial houses, honestly.
Commercial houses, good.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So he is asking, why are call sheets sent out the night before? I have my crews and cast for student films asking me what is the call time and when is the end time, even weeks before the shoot, so that they can arrange their schedules. So what is the best way to deal with these people who want to know everything regarding call sheets ahead of time? How do you and other professional ADs approach this? We touched on it.
Well, my second, we insist on getting a prelim call sheet out first thing in the morning for the next day. So although the final version of the sheet won't be approved and officially sent out until right after wrap that night, we do prelim call sheets first thing in the morning. So we don't necessarily send that prelim to all the actors, but certainly some actors, and especially the actors that want to know around what their call time is going to be for the next day, we can get them that information. On my one-liner that is published before we start shooting, I have call times on my one-liner with a big banner that says approximate call times only. But one of the meetings I have with my second is we go through and do call times for the entire show. So people have an idea what the overnighters are. Yeah, just so people have an idea of how to, manage their lives basically. But again, sometimes those call times change because of stuff that happens over the course of the day. But so to answer those questions, yeah, so the prelim call sheet comes out in the morning. Yeah.
Now, and this is from me, how much, if you've got, say, a week worth of exterior shooting planned, how much is that weather going to screw up your schedule if it's incompatible with what you're scheduled to be shooting? And how do you deal with that? All of a sudden a big storm is blowing in that you didn't know about a day before or something.
Well, you'd know the day before for sure. You'd know, we keep an eye on that like crazy for sure. Environment Canada is pretty good, even obviously they're not super good, but they're pretty good even with 3 or 4 days ahead, depending on the time of the year. One of the other meetings we have in prep is a weather cover meeting. Sometimes it's not as important for the show what the weather is. Some scenes, though, the beach scene with the 10 actors and the beach party, that's going to be a problem. So during prep, we have weather cover meetings. We would make the call. So if the beach scene was supposed to play on Wednesday, on Monday night, depending on the size of the show, the art department requirements, how much of a setup for that beach scene it is, how many actors do we have to reschedule, how many background performers do we have to reschedule. I bet you by Monday night, we would make the call whether we were going to proceed with Wednesday's plan or not. In which case, we would have a plan already in place, and that would be in our weather cover meeting. We would run to the stage and do the cafe scene or whatever. Sometimes things change so fast that that it is the night before that you make those calls, but that's such a pain in the ass for, like the art department, they're already set for that, and then all of a sudden you're not going to the beach. That's grouchy. So again, depending on the size of the show, I would say Monday night you'd make that call.
Okay. Now, Dila is asking, do you print and hand out one-line schedule to all the crew, or is it expected that people check it by their phones or iPads?
We have really, we are really steering away from hard copies these days. That's something, actually, I mentioned her, Clara George, a producer that I work with on Magicians. She has spearheaded a movement on the West Coast amongst film companies to really, really cut back, reuse, recycle. And back in the day, the amount of paper that my department was responsible for was just ridiculous. Every time new scripts come out, we print that, we print call sheets, we print sides. We used to go through so much paper. Now everyone has smartphones, everyone has iPads. When I did Magicians, it was already multiple seasons they'd already done, but Clara had gone this new way for them. And so it was the very first show for me that I worked entirely off my iPad. There's a program called Scriptation, which you can input the script in as a PDF, and then you have total control over annotation and highlighting and drawing on it. You can insert pictures. Scriptation, it's a fantastic program. And I used it all season, and my iPad fits in my cargo pants / shorts, and it was totally great. And I was like, I totally turned it around for me. So now, and especially with COVID, that will be one of the things, is that we're not printing stuff to hand out anymore. Everything is going to be electronic, which is awesome.
Yeah,
I'm pro that for sure.
Okay. Dennis is asking, is it the first's job to deal with less than stellar actors? For example, somebody showing up drunk, stoned, angry, or being nasty?
Yes and no. I mean, it's my department that has to deal with those guys, yes. But one of the great things I kind of differentiate between on set, there's the adults and the kids, and I'm kind of one of the bosses of the kids, and the adults are the producers and the executives. And one of the reasons I really like my job is that those decisions and really those dealings with people like that, with actors like that, it's not really my responsibility. I will deal with them on set when they get to set, but if they're causing big trouble, then I just call in one of the adults to deal with it. Kind of the same thing goes for like the big decisions that need to be made. As much as, yes, I am running the set and I am one of the bosses, when it really comes down to making big decisions, I'm glad that those aren't mine. I'm asked and I give input into what I think. If they're like major scheduling changes or big things that need to happen, I'm always asked for my input, but I'm not ultimately responsible for making those decisions, which I kind of appreciate.
Great. Okay, a couple more here, Shamess, before we let you go. Beth, hi Beth, is asking, do you expect much change with background performers? And I think Beth's referencing kind of this new way after dealing with COVID and heading back to camera. Are you expecting much change in the nature of the job, I suppose, for background performers?
No, I think that at least to start, we're not going to have as many big background days. I think that background performers are going to need to wear masks when they're in holding and when they're on their way to set and from set. Obviously, when cameras are rolling, they won't be expected. That doesn't make any sense. I think the biggest thing is that the writers right now, at least to start, are going to probably steer away from those massive nightclub scenes or massive bar scenes until it becomes more under control. That I would say that would be the biggest change, is we're just not going to see as many scenes with big numbers, at least to start.
Wonderful. And the next question from Brian. Hi, Brian. Brian is a first on a lot of indie sets here, Brian Skinner, as well as being a filmmaker, and is asking, have you used Studio Binder? And if so, do you have any thoughts on it?
I have not. I know Brian. I have not. I don't know. Would it be for doing breakdowns or?
Well, Studio Binder, when you go to their website, offers a variety of tools. And Brian, I don't know if you want to pop on through Q&A or if you have further questions about it. I know they provide an array of tools, production-related tools, and I'm not sure of their specifics for first ADs, but I know it's a site I often go to for various templates, instructions, tutorials, and I'm working a lot on indie sets here in Victoria, so I use them fairly often, but at a professional capacity, I think Brian's just wanting to know if you're experienced with it or if you found it useful. So.
Gotcha. Sorry. No.
That's okay. Understood. Oh, great. Well, we burned through all those questions, Seamus, and so I just wanted to say a big thank you. Thank you for giving up what looks to be a pretty decent day out there. I hope is for you too. So we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. And we appreciate all the words of wisdom from you. And maybe we'll see you on set one day.
Awesome. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.